And good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Katherine Albrecht here with you, filling in as a guest host for Alex Jones on a much-needed vacation. Let's hope he can get that blood pressure down. We need him tanned, rested, and ready to continue to lead the revolution. So I'm filling in for him yesterday, today, and Friday. Happy to be here with you, and we've got a ton of really hot news going on right now. You know, there's one place on the globe that I got to say makes pretty much every other place on the globe look like a Caribbean vacation, and that place would be North Korea. No matter what else you want to say, I mean, you got to, in some ways, you got to kind of stand back and go, you know, it is kind of impressive, I suppose, that North Korea has managed to maintain its position sort of outside of the circle of U.S. influence, but it's done so in such a horrific way for its people that you've really got to kind of have a shudder go down your spine when you think about that country. If you think about all of the worst regimes of history, and then you kind of multiply them all together and stick them into the 21st century, but I guess make it seem as though the people were living 100 years before, then you've got North Korea, freezing cold, not enough food to go around, absolutely horrific communist dictator, one of the few remaining places on earth that still hasn't quite figured out that full-scale communism leads to starvation and misery on the part of people, or if they have figured it out, I guess they don't care. But North Korea is really, you know, when you think about like Burma, I mean, there are some places on the globe you just go, ew, yuck, and North Korea certainly is one of them. Well, North Korea has been in the news, weirdly, for actually the last couple of months. And this hour, I'm going to be talking about Dennis Rodman's recent trip, along with, of all things, 3 of the Harlem Globetrotters. Anybody old enough to remember those guys? Are they still even around? Are they like geriatrically bouncing basketballs in their 70s now? I don't know, but they headed with Dennis Rodman off to North Korea, the behind what I think even goes beyond the iron bamboo curtain into the absolute heart of sheer human misery itself. There they were. So I'll be giving you the details on that, and also on some other recent famous Americans who've been heading off to North Korea. North Korea, of course, more than happy to accept that kind of international attention. North Korea seems to really thrive on doing the big theatrical performances. You guys seen the videos on YouTube? It seems like every year on the birthday of the great leader or some other national holiday, they have all of their soldiers come out, all the men and the women, and they march in unison, and they hold up these big cards, and they have the beautiful women in their flower dresses dancing around in their lovely colors, and really make it seem like it's just a wonderland. It's just a paradise. But what they don't show you is behind the scenes. You know, they did the same thing for Catherine the Great when she would travel through Russia, as they do for these visiting international representatives who go there with film cameras. They used to set up for Catherine the Great's visits in these terribly destitute villages. They would set up false fronts so that as she would ride down the street in her cavalcade or whatever it was, her gold gilded carriage, that on both sides of the street would be these opulent homes and these happy, well-dressed, smiling children wearing neatly ironed frocks and pinafores, and everyone would be smiling and well-fed. And what they didn't know is that they spent a fortune building up literally just the facade for her and the visiting foreign dictators. And if you just peeled that away, it was almost like the Wild West, where they had those fake front, the false front buildings that you'd see in the old Westerns, where if you looked behind it, you would see the misery, the human misery in those villages. Same thing true in North Korea, where literally hundreds of thousands, potentially even millions of people have starved to death because of their terrible communist policies. And yet we've got U.S. Celebrities, I suppose, if you want to call Dennis Rodman a celebrity, just trying to ride that, ride the horror we all feel about North Korea. All right, I'll give you details on that when we come back right after this. Katherine Albrecht filling in for Alex Jones. Katherine Albrecht here, filling in for Alex Jones, the alpha dog of the freedom movement. So glad that he's on our team. I got to tell you, after seeing him on Piers Morgan, and we're going to be covering a clip here shortly of Louis Farrakhan responding to that. But, after seeing Alex Jones on Piers Morgan, I got to say, I think I had the reaction everybody did when we first saw it, which was, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm seeing that on live network television. And then I think, the aftermath, I got to tell you, I am so glad that guy is on our team. Seriously, would you want to be on the opposite team of all of that energy? And the thing about Alex Jones is that energy represents the energy of literally millions of listeners across this country. That is the energy on which this country was founded, that independent energy that says, heck no. People descended from ancestors who said heck no to even a greater extent than I think we can even imagine today. If you think about what this country was founded on, people who got so sick of the power structure as it currently stood that they were willing to brave oceans and privation and deprivation and starvation and having to figure out how to hack their way through an entirely new continent because they were so fed up with the power structure. And I got to tell you, that is the blood that flows in the veins of true American patriots. That is the blood that flows in my veins and in your veins. When you think about our ancestors who left whatever hellhole they were in, whether it was in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Southern Europe, Africa, well, that's a whole other story there, isn't it? France. You got to talk about Northern Europe. You got to talk about Mexico. You got to talk about all through South America. We've got people who, through one means or another, came to this country and had to carve out a life. And when you look at how they managed to pull that off, and especially, those folks who left family, left homes, left everything that they had, everything that they knew, and came out here to say, it's worth it to me to strike out on my own. I got to tell you, that's a proud heritage. Yeah, and thinking about what it is to be truly an American in this country, in this day and age, and then taking a look at what's happening in other parts of the world where people don't have even a fraction of the freedoms that we have. I've got to remind everybody listening, the next time you want to rag on the U.S. of A., and believe me, it's pretty easy to do. There's a lot of stuff going wrong here. But the next time you want to do that, I want you to remember something. I've traveled all over this world. And I know Alex has done a considerable amount of traveling as well. I've lived in Mexico. I've lived in Japan. I have been to Thailand. I have been all over this globe. And I got to tell you, whenever I come home, I want to kiss the ground. I really do, because this is the only place where people truly, I think, even in the core of their being, on the cellular level, understand what it is to be free and independent and not to be under the thumb of somebody else. And so we've got that heritage leaving these oppressive hellholes that our ancestors left for a variety of different reasons and coming over here. And then even once we got here, our ancestors had to stand up and do it again. Hey, you British, No. The whole reason we left in the first place was that we didn't want to be dealing with folks like you. So, when I see people like Alex Jones standing up on Piers Morgan on that television program and saying, heck no, you can't. It's not going to work. I got to tell you, it does me proud. Really, it does, to know that I live in a country where, especially as a woman, where men are real men and men are willing to stand up for what's right. And I'm certainly, as a Bible-believing, wear-it-on-my-sleeve Christian, I'm absolutely a believer in praying for my enemies and turning the other cheek and doing all of that too. But I also know that during World War II, when the Jews said, oh yeah, look how harmless we are. Take our guns. Go ahead. Look, we're harmless. See, don't hurt us. That attitude and that approach doesn't work. So the only thing those folks understand, the only thing that the Nazis understood, was sheer brute force. And that doesn't mean you initiate it against them, but it certainly means that you show them that they cannot initiate force against you without a fight. So I think that's really, really an important position. I think they do a good job here in New Hampshire. I live in the Free State, part of the Free State Project. Check it out if you haven't already done so. Liberty in our lifetime. Thousands of people moving to New Hampshire to try to set up a free society right here. And the symbol of the Free State Project is the porcupine. And I like it because a porcupine, we have them. I actually saw one in our local woods. He scurried up a tree when I walked past with my dog. The little porcupine, he doesn't want to mess with us. He saw my dog. He didn't say, oh yeah, I'm gonna kick your rear end. He said, ew, it's a dog. I'm just gonna book it up this tree. Leave me alone. And yet, I'll tell you this, if he couldn't have gotten up the tree and my dog would have come at him, my dog would have been the worse in that encounter. So the porcupine is a great symbol. Kind of like the don't tread on me snake. It sends a strong message of, I don't want to be messed with, but if you mess with me, it's not going to go well with you. And I think that's really the core fundamental message. So now let's talk about the U.S. in contrast to some of the other countries out there. And there's one country that has been in the news pretty considerably in the last couple of months, and that is North Korea. You know, we just had a regime change over there, not much of one. Kim Jong-il passed away. His son now, Kim Jong-un, you know, moon-faced Kim Jong-un, the the one that The Onion parodied as having won the Time Magazine's Sexiest Man of the Year. Yeah, he's about as unsexy as they get, but the Chinese newspaper, by the way, the People's Republic of China newspaper, actually bought that hook, line, and sinker and printed this breathless review that Kim Jong-un had been voted Sexiest Man of the Year until they realized they'd been had. Totally snookered by The Onion. Kind of a fun story there. But, yeah, Kim Jong-un, who, you know, we're still trying to kind of figure out what's up with that guy. You know, he's got this big kind of baby face and doesn't smile very often and looks like he's been kind of, I don't know how to put it, maybe a little over-sheltered by his dad. We'll see how all that turns out. But he runs one of the most brutal dictatorships on the face of the globe, and that would be North Korea. So when you think about North Korea, you have to think about freezing cold. It's extraordinarily cold up there, especially in the wintertime. It's like 15, 20, 30 below. So it's really cold. It is also really poor. And when I say really poor, they don't have any of the advantages of a functional free market. So if you go up to North Korea, not that you could get in because it is a militarized zone with all the borders closed down with, well-armed. That's the one thing they do spend money on is on their military. You can't get into North Korea unless you're famous or unless you wind up getting arrested somehow, near the border. So North Korea is not a place that a lot of people get to go. However, North Korea seems to be really, how would I call it? Almost like trying to get international attention for itself in a variety of rather bizarre ways. You can go online, and my favorite, I'll see if I can find this. There's an absolutely hilarious video where somebody put some great music to the marching of all of their military, which they do every year. At these huge get-togethers where they have, thousands of kids come out and thousands of women in their brightly colored traditional dress dancing around and thousands of soldiers marching in the street. And they march down the street with their bombs and their weapons and really make a show of it and make it seem like North Korea is a success. The reality, though, North Korea is the biggest failure on planet Earth. The biggest failure. Let me tell you right now, total deaths in North Korea, this is between 1994 and 1998 during their, just one of their famines due to economic mismanagement and natural disasters. They lost what some estimates say is up to 3.5 million members of their population to literal starvation. People reduced to eating the bark on trees. People reduced to eating grass. And yet, whenever somebody from the West goes out there with a camera, they set up these Potemkin villages. A Potemkin village, you can start page it, look it up, is what they set up in the former Russia, or actually back in Russia. The Potemkin villages were these fake villages designed to impress foreign dignitaries, and especially Catherine the Great, during her visit to Crimea. And they set up these villages where you could just cruise on down and everybody was well-dressed and well-fed and smiling, and there were curtains in the windows and beautiful flowers blooming in front of all these lovely doors. But the reality was it was just a fake facade set up to impress when behind the scenes people were starving and the villages were absolutely destitute. The people were dressed in rags and it was total misery. So anytime you hear this phrase, kind of your 50-cent phrase of the day, the phrase Potemkin village means a fake village designed to impress. It's now used in politics and economics to describe really anything that is built solely to deceive others into thinking the situation is better than it is. Well, you could say that North Korea opens up its borders periodically to kind of portray this notion of being a wonderful, well-run, happy country filled with smiling, lovely women and children and military might. But if you look behind the scenes, you'll see the starvation and the misery in that country. If you have a cell phone in North Korea, it is, I need to probably look at the exact penalty of this, but I know that cell phones are absolutely prohibited, and they do have labor and concentration camps there for people who defy the regime in really any way. So a cell phone, any access to the internet, this country is completely cut off from all technology. Now, why am I telling you all of this and what's going on in the news with North Korea? Well, Dennis Rodman, of all people, all right, Dennis Rodman, picture him, if you don't know who he is, Dennis Rodman, basketball player. He's the guy who would dye his hair like pink and green and crazy colors, if you picture Dennis Rodman. Well, there's a photo of him now in the New York Times sitting next to Kim Jong-un, and they're both smiling and laughing, watching a basketball game right there in North Korea. What the heck? All right, well, when we come back, I'll tell you about Dennis Rodman and also a couple other famous Americans, including a U.S. billionaire and his daughter who recently traveled to North Korea as well. Details on that and more when we come back. Stay tuned. Hey, I'm back. Katherine Albrecht here with you, filling in for Alex Jones yesterday, today, and Friday as he takes a well-deserved vacation. Hopefully he's getting a massage somewhere on some beautiful island in the sunshine. That's what I like to think, at least. We need him in top form. So I'm delighted to be here with you, sharing the news. And some of the weirdest news, like, it's just bizarre. We've got Dennis Rodman, of all people, kind of the clown of the NBA there with his brightly colored blue hair and yellow hair. If you don't know who he is, look him up. You will recognize him instantly because he's kind of an icon out there. He is, let's see, how old is he? He's 51 now. And he went from being an NBA American Hall of Fame professional basketball player, playing for the Detroit Pistons, San Antonio Spurs, Chicago Bulls, LA Lakers, and Dallas Mavericks, onto a kind of a bizarre acting career there for a while. He did some wrestling. He's done a whole bunch of stuff. He actually put out an autobiography in 1996 called Bad As I Wanna Be. He pursued a high-profile affair with Madonna and was briefly married to actress Carmen Electra, from Baywatch fame. Yeah, kind of a guy who's really flitted about and done a lot of things. But I got to say, he's even outdone himself here in terms of disgusting. Traveling to North Korea, and when he got to North Korea, now this is kind of reminding me of Hanoi Jane. When Jane Fonda went and smiled and sat with the crew of an anti-aircraft, an anti-aircraft gun, and literally sat there and smiled with the crew. This is the anti-aircraft gun that was used to shoot down American pilots. So scary stuff. We've got people who do this kind of thing and think that they're being cool. These celebrities who go, over to these countries and put themselves into these positions. Got to say, a lot of American veterans look at Jane Fonda now and don't want to hear anything about her. I would say that even though we're not at war with North Korea, that given the country's human rights record, that we really need to, I think, visit the same kind of shame on Dennis Rodman that was visited on Hanoi Jane, really. Human rights in North Korea, heavily restricted, public executions, arbitrary detentions, a total ban on any access to the internet, cell phones, any modern technology, people starving in their villages across the country. And they've got this cult of personality in which their great leader is revered almost as a god. He's like the celebrity of the entire country right now. That's Kim Jong-un, the son of recently deceased leader Kim Jong-il. And now you've got Dennis Rodman here in all of these public publicity photos, laughing, sitting there, having a great old time. And let me read some of these quotes here. The company that set this up, not surprisingly, is called Vice Media. That doesn't surprise me in the least. Vice Media, a film crew, had Rodman and the Harlem Globetrotters head out there. Apparently, Kim Jong-un is a big fan of basketball, as was his father. And the group got into Pyongyang earlier this week, last week, with approval to film a documentary. Now, let me read you some of the quotes here from the New York Times. Apparently, he had a blast at the game. So Kim Jong-un invited them back to his home for a party, and they had a grand old time. Speeches were made. Dennis made a very nice one, and they were met with rounds of applause. Yeah, they invited him back to his home for a party and had a grand old time. This is a direct quote from the guy who set the film trip up. Very bizarre. Yeah. All right, one other thing I want to read you here at the very end. Kim expressed to Rodman he hoped that their visit would improve North Korean-American relations. Rodman spent the game watching from a courtside table with Kim. He also gave a speech to the crowd in which he told Kim, quote, "You have a friend for life." Now, how much do you think Dennis Rodman really understands about international politics or history or really anything else about North Korea for that matter? Probably extremely little. And yet now we've got all these images coming out of North Korea, and they thrive on this kind of stuff. Hey, look, we're just friendly folks. You know, nothing to see here. Look, we got this beautiful country, happy, smiling people. Look, even Dennis Rodman's having a great time. We're just party animals over here in North Korea. What they don't tell you is about the torture camps that they run. Yeah. All right. Stay tuned. I'm Katherine Albrecht, Dr. Katherine Albrecht. My own website, by the way, kmashow.com. And, of course, want to refer you to the InfoWars website and shop. And I encourage you to support the sponsors of this radio show. Well, my least favorite things. I thought of re-recording that. I don't know. It's ironic. Yeah, my favorite things. If you're not familiar with my work, I am the anti-RFID lady. I've been working to oppose consumer privacy invasion since 1999. Founded the consumer privacy group Caspian, which has, at last count, I think we had like 20,000 people who'd sign up to be part of our consumer army opposing the use of RFID spy chips in consumer products. I am the co-author of the best-selling book Spy Chips. If you don't have a copy, swing by your local library and just get it and read it for free. But I want you to be up to speed on it because all of the developments happening with RFID are every bit as relevant today as when we first wrote about them. And in fact, I would say even more so today. Lots of stuff happening on the RFID front, and you can find more information about all of that through my own radio program, which broadcasts Monday through Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. Central Time. You can find it on my website, kmashow.com. You can also find it at gcnlive.com. Alex and I are on the exact same radio network, and my show comes on just an hour after his end. So there you have it. All right. Well, I'm delighted to be filling in for Alex Jones today. Want to remind you, before it slips my notice, that you should be supporting the sponsors of InfoWars and of this radio program so that Alex's voice can continue to reach the millions of folks it reaches every day. And I want to let you know that if you're looking for water filtration, ProPure is the place to go. You can find their link at InfoWarsShop.com. InfoWars gear, of course, shirts, hats, bumper stickers, anything else you can use to get the word out. Please, by all means, do that at InfoWarsShop.com. eFoods Direct, of course, we all should be prepared. In fact, even the government tells you to get prepared. So, you know, if they're telling it to you, you're really in trouble. All right, yeah, eFoods Direct. Youngevity, of course, whole family of health products there for you at InfoWarsHealth.com. And then finally, I want to put in a plug for the company that I helped to create, and that is StartPage.com. The private alternative to Google, Yahoo, and Bing. If you haven't taken the Google needle out of your arm yet, please consider doing so because every time you log on to Google, Google makes a record of everything you searched for. Google is not a search engine designed to give you answers to all your questions for free. Google is a honeypot. It's a trap. Yeah, that's what it is. It wants you to log on multiple times a day and tell it what you're thinking. Yeah. How do you think it is that Google, this is a perfect segue here, that Google, what is he, CEO Eric Schmidt, has now become a billionaire? He is about to sell 40% of his stock for over $2 billion, if he hasn't already done so. I think he's in the process of doing that right now. Eric Schmidt becoming a billionaire on the backs of all of us, really, because every time we log on to Google and we make a search, they say, got a live one. See, they've got a file with all of our names at the top. And in that file, they know every single thing you have ever searched for on Google. The good news is if you can stand being away from Google for 9 months, about the time it takes for a lady to have a baby, if you can stay away for 9 months, then you drop off of their active surveillance list and you drop into kind of a background list where they say they kind of encrypt it and they sort of put it away out of sight. So if you can stay away from Google for 9 months, you can get out of the active eyeball that is searching you from Google. And the best way to do that, startpage.com, the world's most private search engine. I helped to create it, so I can vouch for it. When you search with StartPage, it searches Google for you. And what we do is we take your search term, submit it to Google, strip out all identifying information about you. We get the results back from Google and strip out all of their tracking cookies and other surveillanceware. And then we serve you those results in total privacy. And then we delete all records of your visit. So even if there were a subpoena or a warrant or, God forbid, a hacker or who knows what were to get into the Startpage servers, there would be literally no information on you whatsoever. Startpage.com, check it out. Take the 2-week Startpage challenge and pull that Google needle out of your arm. All right, well, speaking of Google and Eric Schmidt, I was telling you that there was a billionaire who recently went to North Korea, and that billionaire was Eric Schmidt, and his daughter Sophie, grown woman, put together a fascinating blog on what it's like to actually be in North Korea. Yeah, so I encourage you to check it out. It's called Sophie in North Korea. You can Startpage it. We don't say Google around here because that's billions of dollars of free advertising. We say Startpage it. Startpage Sophie in North Korea. And it's called It Might Not Get Weirder Than This. And she blogged about her trip to North Korea and all the bizarre things that she experienced from her arrival through all the traveling, the lodgings, the everything else, and the Potemkin village, essentially, that was set up for their visit. So check it out. Fascinating reading. I wish I had a little more time to go into it, but we got a lot more to cover here. So yes, the Schmidts going to North Korea in January. Now we got Dennis Rodman over there, and breaking news right now coming out just today. North Korea, maybe they are emboldened by all these American high-profile folks visiting them. They have vowed to cancel the Korean War ceasefire. All right, mind-blowing. This literally just came out from Associated Press. They have vowed today to cancel the 1953 ceasefire that ended the Korean War. Now, this is bizarre because you'd think a war that was fought in the 50s would just kind of be done and over, but it's not, at least not according to North Korea. They're vowing that within just a couple of days, they're going to lift the ceasefire, which would put them back into a state of war with South Korea. Isn't this wild? Yeah, let me read you this. North Korea vowed Tuesday, this is the Associated Press, that's today, to cancel the 1953 ceasefire that ended the Korean War, citing a U.S.-led push for punishing UN sanctions over its recent nuclear test and ongoing U.S.-South Korean joint military drills. Without elaborating, the Korean People's Army Supreme Command, that would be the North Korean military there, warned of surgical strikes meant to unify the divided Korean peninsula and of an indigenous, quote, precision nuclear striking tool. This comes on amid reports that Washington and North Korean ally Beijing have approved a draft of a UN Security Council resolution calling for sanctions in response to that nuclear test that North Korea did just a couple of weeks ago. All right, well, that's a draft circulating around North Korea, becoming a bit emboldened, saying that they're about to go back to war with South Korea. All right, we'll be watching this one closely. I'm sure Alex will keep you posted on all the developments there. All right, speaking of Alex, and man, I miss that guy. Speaking of Alex, he was in the news lately. In fact, Louis Farrakhan, head of the Nation of Islam, recently gave a speech in which he had something to say about Alex Jones. Let's go ahead and listen to the clip.
They are angry with their government. And I saw Mr. Alex Jones on television recently with Piers Morgan of CNN. And he said, before we allow you to take our guns from us, 1776 will play out again. We intend to return America, not to a democracy. You are lying to the American people. You're robbing them of democracy. This is not a democracy. This is an oligarchy that is leading America into fascism. Yes, you are stripping the American people of their rights in the name of fighting terror. You are the terrorist, using your weapons of war and your mighty arsenal to terrorize the nations of the earth to submit to you and your wicked policies of divide and conquer.
All right. Well, say what you will about Louis Farrakhan. You got to say he's got this particular one right. Yeah, he saw Alex Jones on Piers Morgan too. Wasn't that like? I got to say, like, I'm sure someday when all of the media pundits go back and and all of the academic professors who do media studies go back and look at like the top 10 pivotal moments on American television or even global television, that interview is going to have to be right up there where Alex Jones really gave Piers Morgan a piece of his mind in terms of the Second Amendment. I got to tell you, even Louis Farrakhan talking about this, saying that we've got some real issues here, and if they make an attempt to take away people's guns and their Second Amendment rights, that there will be a civil war. Yeah. This is part of a longer speech, by the way, called The Mark of the Beast. It's actually a lecture that Louis Farrakhan gave on the Mark of the Beast. Now, he's the head of the Nation of Islam, kind of an interesting political character in his own right. Very controversial. I disagree with a lot of what he's about and agree with other pieces. But he's talking about the state of the world at this moment, and this particular excerpt is from a series of lectures called The Time and What Must Be Done. He refers to Elijah Muhammad saying France is headed towards destruction. He speaks out about AFRICOM and how America went in to kill his, quote, brother, Gaddafi, and about how America pits people and races against one another in a divide and conquer mechanism, which has been effective, hey, throughout all of history. That's how they've done it. And the they, by the way, I've got a phrase for them. You ready for this? Yeah, you can call them the global elite. You can call them the Illuminati. You can call them the banksters. You can call them whatever you want. But I refer to them as the pawn scum. And the reason I use that phrase is I went to Harvard. I went to elite prep schools. I've hung out with these people. And they really view themselves as the cream that has risen to the top. I used to get organic raw milk from a local farm here in New Hampshire, and the cream literally would rise to the top. I'm sure our grandparents' milk would be that way before they homogenized it. So you have this cream, and you can skim it off the top, and you can whip it up. It's wonderful, fresh, organic cream. Well, I think that these folks who run the world view themselves as being that cream that's risen to the top. You know, sort of the cream of the crop, the top 1%, however they view themselves. But I view them as the slime that has risen to the top of the pond. See, I live in New Hampshire, where we're the granite state up here. And we've got all these our whole landscape is basically granite. It was really tough for our ancestors to plow this land because it's full of rocks and boulders and such. But when it rains, the depressions in the granite collect the water. And so we are covered, this entire state is covered with ponds and little lakes and lots of water. And at a certain point in the summertime, that water, especially if it's getting runoff from the fertilizer people put on their lawns, that water becomes green and it has a thick mat of slime on the top. And I refer to that as the pond scum. And that thick mat of slime, I think of as the people who would rule over the rest of us are the pond scum, choking out the light and the oxygen and all of the food from the other 99% of us underneath as we're gasping. And what we need to do periodically in New Hampshire, we go out with these big rakes and we just scrape that stuff off and let the sunlight circulate. And I think that's probably what we need to do as a society as well. Vote the bums out of office and really let some sunshine and oxygen back in. All right, well, this reminded me, Louis Farrakhan talking about the Second Amendment, and then we've also got Eric Schmidt and Dennis Rodman over there telling Kim Jong-il he's got a friend for life. Well, it was reminding me of Harry Belafonte. Remember a couple of weeks ago, Harry Belafonte came out with a couple of statements about Obama? And speaking of third world dictators, Harry Belafonte, another celebrity who wants to ride the coattails of some of these things. Do you remember when he came out and actually said Obama should act like a third world dictator and just put all his opponents in jail? I think I've got the clip queued up. Let's listen to that one again.
You've fought for decades for some of the, quote, entitlements that the right wing wants to try and balance this budget, balance the deficit off of. As you look at this, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, you've been an activist leader from Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, through Dr. King, through Mandela to Obama. How do you view this, and what is the challenge for those that are on the field today?
What I think has most attracted me to this whole process is watching the political maturity of the American people. because there was a great question during the first election as to whether or not Barack would even be elected. And after the turnout so emphatically put him in the presidency, it was interesting to watch the second turn when everybody really didn't quite know what the game would be. Well, the American people, in their maturity, declared themselves fully. We want what Barack Obama is talking about. We want the country to go in that direction. And what fascinates me is that in the face of millions of Americans expressing their desire, the whole political establishment defining its game, that there should be this lingering infestation of really corrupt people who sit trying to dismantle the wishes of the people, the mandate that has been given to Barack Obama. And I don't know what more they want. The only thing left for Barack Obama to do is to work like a third world dictator and just put all these guys in jail. You're violating the American desire.
Yeah, the American people in their maturity, I'm choking, excuse me, it's hard to even say those words. The American people in their maturity elected Barack Obama for a second term, and what he needs to do is act like a third world dictator and put all of his critics in jail. Okay, well, this kind of seems like what's going on with the celebrity mentality right now. You know, you've got Dennis Rodman over there saying to Kim Jong-un, you've got a friend for life. Even though North Korea, right on the heels of that great basketball game and the big hunkin' party that they just threw there for Dennis Rodman and everybody, you know, doing the Junke dance, you know, he's now turning around and saying, oh yeah, and by the way, we're going to strip off the ceasefire. So not only are we going to brutalize our own people, but now we're going to start brutalizing the rest of the world with our armaments, our nukes here. Yeah, thank you. And then we've got Harry Belafonte going out there saying, oh yeah, Barack Obama's just got to become a third world dictator. Do these people not understand what third world dictators are about? Clearly, they must not. Yeah, third world dictators, scary people, and not the people you want running your world, and maybe not the people you want, I don't know, giving you fame and fortune out there. So Dennis Rodman, shame on you. All right. I am your host, Dr. Katherine Albrecht, and my website, kmashow.com. Of course, I want to encourage you to swing by InfoWars. I'm going to be with you for the rest of today, the next 2 hours. Got some fabulous guests lined up for you coming up just around the break. And I'll also be with you on Friday. My Fridays, by the way, on my show, Good News Friday. So we'll lighten the load just a little bit by the end of the week. All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back on the other end of this break. Hey, I'm back. Katherine Albrecht here. No senator's son or daughter, for that matter. Got to point out, you know, when I say, yeah, I went to elite prep schools, well, 1 year, 9th grade, full scholarship. Yeah, my parents were divorced. We had no money. And my single parenting mom reached out to our local prep school and said, hey, maybe I can get my daughter a little better start in life, and had me go in and take the test. And I was your typical, like, sullen 14-year-old with my arms folded across my chest. But apparently I did pretty well on the test because they let me in. So I had an interesting year that year. While all my friends at the school never really became close friends, but they were all going off to cotillion, and they were all going off to ski trips in the Swiss Alps to their second homes, and they were all having coming out parties and doing all of these things. And you know, there we were trying to survive on brown rice. So don't be thinking as I say things like that, oh yeah, Katherine grew up with a silver spoon in her mouth. I really didn't. But it gave me a real insight into how the senator's sons are educated. They don't go to the schools that your kids go to. Well, maybe your kids go to one of those schools, but they don't go to the schools that they want everybody else's kids at. You know, the government schools that they want the rest of everybody to attend are schools they wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Believe me. They've got their kids going to Phillips Exeter and Phillips Andover and to all the elite prep schools, and they get a very different education. Very different. In fact, they're educated to be leaders. They're educated to think independently, to think their own thoughts, as opposed to being educated to sit down and shut up and follow the rules. You know, nowhere else are you going to find, anywhere in history, a period of time in which an entire multiple generations of young people, literally millions of people's sons and daughters, are placed into a bureaucratic government-run institution in large numbers, almost a factory that cranks them out, as you would. And they're on the assembly line teaches them to be quiet, teaches them to keep their mouth shut, teaches them to keep their heads low, teaches them to obey authority, to ask permission for every last, hey, excuse me, Mrs. Johnson, can I get a Kleenex, please? My nose is running. Now, excuse me, Mr. Patterson, can I use the bathroom? I have to pee, right? That kind of training is not good for liberty. I got to tell you, it's not. And I know what I'm talking about. I've got a doctorate in education from Harvard University. That's what I wound up actually doing there. And I've taught in classrooms. I've taught independently. I've been an educational consultant. I've spent most of my life in one version or another doing education, as I believe that my radio show still is probably the most potent form of education I've ever done. But as an educator, I can say, if you want to educate your kids to liberty, you're not going to be finding that education as they sit there in a government-run institution. You know, and as I'm thinking about North Korea, I don't know what their educational system is like there. It would be very interesting to find out, because how is it that they get the entire nation falling at the feet of their great leader who's starving them to death? Yeah, and threatening his neighbors. Ooh, nasty stuff. All right, let's see. Well, we're going to change gears just a little bit when we come back. Talk about how people become evil. Yeah, it's a little easier than you might think, and it ties right into our conversation about North Korea. Right, I'm Dr. Katherine Albrecht, filling in for Alex Jones. Be with you here for the next 2 hours. Thanks for riding shotgun with me. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. And Katherine Albrecht here with you, filling in for Alex Jones as he gets a much-deserved vacation. Let's hope he's taking it easy. I have a feeling he isn't. But let's all wish a little calm and relaxation. Maybe a nice massage, maybe a lovely dinner with his lovely family. Just a little deep breath time. Yeah, for all of us, you think? Yeah, I think every once in a while we do need that. We got to regroup because we got a battle to fight out there. We got some really determined enemies. They seem to never rest. But I'll tell you this, if you never rest, you're going to find yourself wearing out, and we can't do that before the finish line. Need you guys all out there, tanned, rested, ready, well-informed, well-educated, and positive, right? We got to keep that light going out there, because the only way you can fight darkness, my friends, is by turning on a light. You know, if you're standing in a cave and everybody's groping around in the dark, how are you going to fight that? You're going to blast it with more dark? No, you just light a candle. You just turn on your flashlight. You just pull the switch, flip the switch, turn on the 60-watt bulb. Hopefully incandescent, thank you, not a mercury bulb. And then boom, what happens? All of a sudden, the darkness can't stick around, because darkness in the face of light must flee. There's no such thing as a darkness gun. Like if you have a room full of light, you can't aim dark into it and make it go away. But if you have a room full of dark, you can aim light into it and boom, it's got to flee. So I always say the best way to fight, and I got to remind myself, so I'm preaching to the choir here and I'm preaching to my own self, that when we face these dark themes, and I've been facing them since 1999, Alex has been facing them even longer. The only way that you can keep yourself from just going crazy and, getting your blood pressure up and your panties in a bunch, as they say, is really focus on, all right, how can I bring light into the situation? How can we make this better? And that doesn't mean don't be prepared. That doesn't mean roll over and show the bad guys your belly at all by any stretch. Believe me, I'm so glad Alex is on our team. You got to be tough, but you also got to figure out how to bring goodness. All right. Well, to give us a better understanding of how the world gets into these crazy places, I've invited my guest for this hour, Philip G. Zimbardo, Professor Zimbardo, onto the show to talk to us about how people turn evil. And what I think you'll find fascinating in this hour interview with Dr. Zimbardo is that they don't turn evil because they were born that way, that it's actually a conditioning process that is almost like hardwired into the human psychology. And all it takes is for the right set of circumstances to bring that out in really anybody. Well, Philip G. Zimbardo, he's an internationally recognized scholar, he's an educator, he's a researcher, and a media personality. He's won numerous awards and honors in each of these domains. He's been a university professor at Stanford University since 1968. He also has taught at Yale, NYU, and Columbia. He is perhaps best noted for giving psychology away to the public through his popular PBS TV series called Discovering Psychology. He's also written many text and trade books among his 300 publications. Man, this is a guy who does not rest. He was recently president of the American Psychological Association, so he is an absolute expert who knows of what he speaks. Dr. Zimbardo, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the program. Hello.
Hello. It's my pleasure to be here in New York. I'm a New Yorker, but I've been living in San Francisco, and I just, again, enjoy the energy of the city.
Now, you're a keynote speaker at an event there. Can you tell us a little bit about the event that you're attending this week?
Yes. I just finished giving a keynote address to the Eastern Psychological Association, which is all the psychologists on the East Coast. The psychologists are divided into regional areas, and then there is the overall national association, American Psychological Association, of which you had mentioned I was president.
All right.
But I also gave a lecture yesterday at Fordham University in the Bronx.
Fabulous. All right. Well, maybe we can catch some of those on YouTube. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back with our guest, Philip Zimbardo, right after this. I'm your host, Dr. Katherine Albrecht, filling in for Alex Jones. And hello, Katherine Albrecht here, filling in for Alex Jones. Yesterday, today, and Friday. So glad to be with you guys. And I'm so delighted here in really the heart of the liberty movement. It is such an honor to be able to fill in metaphorically and stand in Alex Jones's enormous shoes. And I know that he's been literally since back in the 1990s when I first became politically aware. Alex Jones was out there in the wilderness getting this message out. Now he's got millions of listeners, and that's not an exaggeration. I know that there are millions of you out there. I know that you guys are all on the edge of your seats waiting to see what's going to unfold next in this country. Yeah, well, one of the things I got to figure out as I'm thinking about who to pray for, I am a wear it on my sleeve Christian here. I got to figure out who to pray for in terms of really who are the enemies and how do they get to be what they are and where they are. A little bit in the last hour, we talked about some of the nations across the globe that are doing really rotten things. And I'm thinking here specifically of North Korea, where they have torture camps set up where you can be disappeared in the middle of the night. And one of the questions, of course, anytime you really stare into the face of evil, is you ask yourself whether it's Nazi prison guards, whether it is North Korean torture chamber operators, whether it is even Americans, God forbid, in Abu Ghraib and other places. You say, what is it? How do they find those people? What do they do? Do they comb the entire population looking for the most evil people they can find to populate these prisons and become the guards? Well, if you look at the answer psychologically, what you'll actually find is that those folks are us. They're regular people. And I like to think I would never, no matter what circumstances you put me in, become some kind of evil torturer. But one of the shocking things that's come out of the literature and really trying to understand how we got Nazi Germany and how we get North Korea is that there is deep inside of human psychology some buttons that if you press them the right way and people are not on their guard against this within themselves, that they themselves can become torturers. All right. Well, one of the folks who's done, I believe, the best job of explaining this phenomenon and maybe helping us to understand how to turn it around and prevent it is my guest this hour, Dr. Philip Zimbardo. He's an internationally recognized scholar, educator, researcher, and media personality. He's been a professor at Stanford University since 1968. He's taught at Yale, Columbia, and elsewhere. And he has published over 300 publications. He was recently the president of the American Psychological Association, and he is joining us live from New York, where he just delivered the keynote address to the group of Eastern psychologists. Hello, Dr. Zimbardo.
Hello, glad to be with you.
Great to have you here. Now, I know that your research spans the gamut. You have, in your lengthy career, you've covered so many different topics. In the last hour on the show, I was talking about what's going on over in North Korea. We've got Dennis Rodman over there rubbing elbows with Kim Jong-un and going to parties and saying Kim Jong-un has a friend for life and kind of some weird stuff going on in the media. But when we think about North Korea, which, by the way, also just today announced that they're going to reverse the ceasefire, the 1953 ceasefire against South Korea, you got to say, well, hang on a second, that's a brutal regime. They've got people in prison camps there that are tortured regularly up in North Korea. And I wanted to bring you on because of your psychological insights into what leads people to torture. You did a series of experiments at one point, the prison experiments, that I think shed some light on that. Can you give us an overview of what you've learned and what you learned from the prison experiments?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And I appreciate your introduction to your audience. I think I have to begin by focusing on, it's the wrong question to ask, who are those evil people? That there's no question that people do bad things, evil things. Torture is among the bad things people do. But so is prejudice and discrimination, so is bullying. And so I've been obsessed with the question of why do good people turn evil, not why do bad people do bad things. And I started actually as a kid asking that question because I grew up in a ghetto in the South Bronx in poverty in New York. If you grow up in any inner city anywhere in the world, you're surrounded by people whose job it is to get good kids to do bad things for money. And so I always wondered as a kid, how come some of my friends took the bad path, and I and some other kids took the good path, the right path. And so again, even as a kid, I realized that evil is not in people. Evil is in situations. So that if you grow up privileged, you don't have those negative influence agents around you to tempt you to do bad things. And so now when we're talking about, for example, Abu Ghraib, this infamous prison that really denigrated America's image to the world, because what we saw in those few images were young American prison guards, men and women for the first time, not only abusing prisoners, but apparently taking delight in it, smiling, giving high fives, having prisoners in horrific positions, piled up naked and so forth, dragging them around by a leash. And so when I saw that reminded me of my Stanford prison study, which I did back in 1971. And there, the question I asked is, what happens if you put good people in a bad place? What happens if you put good apples in a bad barrel? And so the study was, we had 24 students, college students from all over the United States who were in the San Francisco area in the summer. And they answered an ad to be part of a study of prison life for 2 weeks, to go for 2 weeks. We randomly assigned half to be guards, half to be prisoners, after we pre-selected the ones who were most normal, most healthy psychologically and physically. And then we gave them uniforms, and we put them in a very realistic kind of psychological prison. And what that means is with bars on their doors and solitary confinement and all the accoutrements of a prison. We had local police arrest the prisoners, bring them to a real jail and then to our jail. We had a prison chaplain and public defenders and parole board hearings and visiting days. So essentially, I created a very realistic simulation. And the idea was to observe what happens when a good kid happens to be put in the role of guard and another good kid happens to be put in the role of prisoner. And to make a long experiment, and the prisoners, of course, lived there 24/7. The guards worked 8-hour shifts. What happened is within 2 days, the first normal, healthy college student prisoner had an emotional breakdown. And each day thereafter, another prisoner had a breakdown in the same way. How could that be? Well, they were responding to the sadistic, brutal behavior of their guards. And essentially what happened was the boys in the role of guards began to do what guards do, is to use power to dominate, to treat the prisoners as if they were their puppets. In fact, that's the phrase one of the guards used. We're like puppeteers, and they are our puppets. Because any prison setting is about one thing. It's about power. So that if you are in the guard role, you have to constantly demonstrate you have power over the prisoners, which means you have to impress upon them that they have none. And any attempt by prisoners to have more power is treated with punishment, with abuse. And the prisoner guard metaphor is a metaphor of life. It's not just prison. You see this in some marital relationships. You see this in some, teacher-student relationships, etc. And so I had to end the study after 6 days. We couldn't go the full 2 weeks because it was out of control.
Yeah, and when you talk about out of control, I know that the prisoners themselves were responding by having breakdowns. What were the prison guards doing?
The prison guards were enjoying the prison guards were enjoying their power. See, again, most people have a minimal amount of power. I mean, if you're rich, you have some monetary power. If you're big, you have power over little kids, littler people. The guards were really acting like big bullies, for the first time. They were enjoying the exercise of power. And really, that is at the core of what you mean by evil. Evil is the exercise and abuse of power to intentionally harm other people in various ways. Now, the key message for your audience is that what my study showed, and what an earlier study by Stanley Milgram, who was my high school classmate in the Bronx, he did a famous study where he had men, not college students, men 20 to 50 years old, think that they were being a teacher, teaching their student a lesson by punishing the student whenever he made a mistake. And 2/3 of those ordinary young men delivered up to 450 volts of what they thought was almost lethal shock. Of course, the person who was pretending to be the learner, the student, was not actually getting the shock, but the person delivering it thought he was. So again, the Milgram study and the Zimbardo Stanford Prison study together say what we have to be aware of is how much our individual behavior is under the influence of situational forces. In the Milgram study, it was an authority, a guy in a lab coat saying, you must go on. It was putting people in a role. You're a teacher, you're a student. In my study, it was you're in the role of prisoner or guard. You're in a setting which encourages guards to dominate prisoners. And in my study, we had uniforms. Guards had elaborate military uniforms. Prisoners had, demeaning uniforms. So again, the people we chose in my study were really good apples, and we put them in a really bad barrel. And the sad message is bad barrels corrupt most good people. Not all, but most. And so again, the message is, and this was true in Abu Ghraib. In Abu Ghraib, just to bring some of your audience up to date, in 2004, we were shocked. The whole world, especially Americans, were shocked to see our military police abusing Iraqi prisoners in horrific ways. And everybody said, who are these bad apples? The Bush administration
hold that thought. We're coming out to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about Abu Ghraib with my guest, Philip Zimbardo, speaking about torture and how, does it lie at the heart of all of us? God, I hope not. Stay tuned.
It's no secret that pathogens such as
And we're back. Katherine Albrecht here, speaking about torture. Yeah, Philip Zimbardo is my guest this hour. I don't know if you want to call it torture, but maybe just the dark side of humanity. We know that, is it Lord Acton who has the quote, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? Dr. Zimbardo, is that, would you concur with that? Do you think that it really is just the power itself that is the corrupting force in human beings?
Yeah, it's one of the corrupting forces. I guess I would back up a little bit and say, one of the amazing things that we have discovered, we have psychologists, biologists, is this brain that we have that gives rise to our mind that really gives us infinite capacity to do anything that is imaginable. So in a sense, all of us have the potential to be kind or cruel, caring or indifferent, destructive or creative. And it really, that same mind pushes some people to become villains, perpetrators of evil, and others to do really heroic things, which is my new mission in life. So that the important thing is not to think I'm not that kind of person when you hear about something terrible happening. Rather ask the question, how could that person have done that? What do I have to know both about the person, but also about the situation that that person was operating and living in at that time? So, for example, most kids have been involved in high school shooting or college shooting. One of the things that we have discovered is in almost every case, they were socially excluded. They were rejected by their peers. They were social isolates. They went around Virginia Tech or they went around this school with no friends, feeling lonely and isolated. And so that is now a basic condition which can give rise to that kind of extreme behavior.
It also gives rise to less extreme behavior like shyness and simply feeling shunned. But what it means is, what about all those people in all those schools who never took the time to make friends, to reach out, to be an ally, to say, hey, sit down next to me. How you doing? How you feeling? So again, I'm just trying to get away from the simplistic view of evil, bad deeds are in bad people. Because, see, that's the dominant view. And then what do? You identify them, you imprison them, you torture them, you execute them, and the problem continues because we have evil situations and we have evil systems.
Well, and this idea that we have evil systems, I think it's there is a tendency to say, oh, look at that person over there. They're a psychopath, or they were just born wrong, or they were wired wrong. Is it the case that some people truly are wired without human empathy, and then other people can be socially maneuvered into not having empathy?
Yeah, yes, of course. I mean, that what we know, actually mostly through psychiatry, is about 1% of every population in the world are people who grow up with really a brain defect. We call it being a psychopath. That is, they grow up without the ability to feel empathy for other people, without the ability to feel suffering. These are people as kids, can torture animals and take delight in it and not feel any guilt or shame. But that's only 1%. You see, and the problem is, so for example, with the shooting in Connecticut, people focused on, oh, this kid was a psychopath. Well, that may be true, but that was not true of any of the other kids and all of the many other shootings. But again, the system analysis is something that we rarely do. So, as I said, social psychologists like me say, look, what we have to understand is basic conditions that people live in. So, if you live in poverty, that's a social condition that's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to do bad things for money. But also, if you live in a setting where people practice dehumanization, they think of others as less than human. If you're in a situation where people treat you in an anonymous way, like you're insignificant, we show that leads to negative behavior. If you're in a situation where you're part of a group and the group has negative norms, that is, it's okay to smoke heroin, it's okay to have unprotected sex, it's okay to steal, cheat, lie, do racist things, then that group has a powerful influence on you because you go along to get along. So we know we have a recipe in psychology of what can make a good kid, a good person of any age, start down that negative path.
Gotcha.
And now what we're trying to do is reverse it. How do you get an ordinary person to be inspired to start on the good path?
All right, we're visiting with Dr. Philip Zimbardo. He is a nationally renowned expert on psychology. He's also the author of a book called The Lucifer Effect. I want to get into that a little bit more when we come back. How good people turn evil. Stay tuned.
We're on the march.
Yeah, those jackboots, man, they keep coming back historically over and over and over. It's the reason I became a liberty, freedom, privacy advocate, is because I've got a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, 4 feet wide, all the way up to the ceiling. I don't know how many shelves are on there, but there's a lot of books of 20th century history. And the reality is, anytime you give too much power to those guys with the jackboots, they will take it from you and they will use it to stomp on you. It's just the way things are. And my guest this hour, Philip Zimbardo, has devoted a career to trying to figure out why this is and then how to counter it, what we can do to take a look, really stare down the face of human evil and figure out what we should be doing instead. Philip, Dr. Zimbardo, there's a story that was in the news yesterday, and I couldn't help but think of your research as we were hearing the dramatic 911 tape of this dispatcher who was fighting to save a patient. Now, I know you've been doing keynotes, and you may not have heard this, but there is a retirement home or a nursing facility called Glenwood Gardens in Bakersfield, California. And there was an 87-year-old woman who collapsed and was not breathing. And the dispatcher, the 911 dispatcher, is trying to give instructions to the nurse at the facility to give this woman CPR, and is frantically making every effort to try to encourage this woman to please start CPR to save the woman's life. And just a quick quote from here, and then I want to play the audio clip because it's chilling. She says, the CPR, or excuse me, the 911 dispatcher says, I understand if your boss is telling you can't do CPR, but as a human being, is there anybody who's willing to help this lady and not let her die? Is there a gardener, any staff, anyone who doesn't work for you anywhere? Can we flag someone down in the street and get them to help this lady? Can we flag a stranger down? I bet a stranger would help her. And the answer that she repeatedly receives is no. Let's listen to the clip. It's chilling.
Coming as quick. They've been on the way all this time, but we can't wait. This lady's going to die. Yeah. Okay. Well, then, if you get anybody, any stranger that happens to walk by that's willing to help, I understand if your boss is telling you can't do it. Yeah. But if there's any, as a human being, I don't, is there anybody that's willing to help this lady and not let her die? Not at this time.
Yeah, not at this time. All right. Dr. Zimbardo, this coldness, I think, has really shocked the nation as we've been hearing this 911 call, that anyone would put the bureaucratic rules of just their local facility, which I guess told the nurses that they're not allowed to perform CPR, that anybody would be able to coldly stand by and let a fellow human being die with that degree of just dispassionate lack of emotion, lack of compassion, lack of anything. Is this one of these psychopaths, this nurse? Is she one of the 1% that was just born wrong? Or what's going on in this call?
No, it's not at all. I mean, again, it's really important not to focus the blame on the nurse. She is simply part of a system that says, here's what we don't want to do because we could get sued. And suppose you start the CPR and you don't do it right and the person will die. So first of all, in any home for the aged, everybody should know how to do CPR. That should be a requirement by every state. So we have to change the law so that not only is it permissible, but they have to know how to do it. This is reminiscent what happened last year, if you remember. In China, a little girl, a toddler, is walking along a street, and a car runs over her, and there is a surveillance camera that shows in 10 minutes, maybe 18 people passed by within 1 foot of that girl, and no one stops to pick her up, and she dies the next day. And this was a moral crisis in China, just as this one should be now in America. And the reaction was, most people said, I wouldn't help either. Not that I didn't care, but people might have thought I did it, or maybe if I moved her, it would make it worse. So this is what you call the need for a good Samaritan law. That is, if you, with good intention, try to help somebody in an emergency situation, you cannot be held liable for any negative consequences. In America, I think only 22 states have such a law. And so here's self-interest to say, I don't want to lose my job if I go against the rules. The rules are don't do it. But the bottom line is, how do you step out of that rule-based system and say, I cannot allow another human being to die because suppose that was my mother, suppose that was me. And so partly what we have to do is, how do you get people to really feel empathy and compassion for every other person, not just an old person or not just a person of a different gender or race or whatever, but for everyone. And so this is just jumping ahead of ourselves. So this is what I've been trying to do in moving from my focus on why did good people turn evil to how can we make ordinary people like that aid in to be inspired to do the heroic thing. In this case, the heroic thing is to go against the system and say, I'm sorry, I know it's a rule, I have to do this. And she would have been honored now rather than shamed.
Right. She would have been the hero. And now, simply because she did follow the rules. And, when you're living in a society where the rules begin to go crazy, and I'm sure that we could look at Nazi Germany or North Korea as examples right now, even, where, in North Korea, it is the appropriate thing to do that if you see somebody with a cell phone and you're a member of the regime there, that you beat that person brutally and torture them and put them into a labor camp. So when the rules begin to go crazy and things begin to go totally wrong, it just seems that there's such a difficulty of human beings to resist that. Before we open up the phone lines, and let me go ahead and do that now, 1-800-259-9231 for your questions and comments for my guest this hour, Dr. Philip Zimbardo. Before we do that, I want to talk, I know you've got a new project, and I also want to talk about the Lucifer effect. So you went from doing the Stanford prison experiments, which people can find online. They can start page that. We don't use Google around here. We use start page. They can start page it. They can also look up your book, The Lucifer Effect, and kind of follow your progression as a force of change in the psychological community. The Lucifer Effect was maybe one step behind where you are now, which is really the Hero Project, to try to get people into not just being evil, but not just not being evil, but literally becoming heroes. Just really quickly, can you give us the overview of the Lucifer Effect?
Sure. So I had mentioned earlier that I did this dramatic study called the Stanford Prison Study to demonstrate, it was a very vivid demonstration of the ease with which good people, good college, intelligent college students, could be seduced to do bad things if they were put in the role of a guard who had power, in a situation where they could use that power. And then in 2004, Abu Ghraib erupted, and there were direct parallels between what happened in Abu Ghraib prison and in my prison. And so I became an expert witness for one of our guards to demonstrate that he was a good apple and that the military put him in a very bad barrel. And I was able to demonstrate that. And in my book, The Lucifer Effect, I not only present the Stanford Prison Study in almost moment by moment, hour by hour, but then I take the reader to Abu Ghraib. And I think I know more about Abu Ghraib than almost anyone. I was immersed in it for several years. But really to understand, how could this happen? How could good American men and women do these terrible things? And the point is, every guard on the night shift did terrible things. No guard on the day shift did. So that's a situational difference. And then it's a simple answer. The military intelligence told only the guards on the night shift, break the prisoners. Do whatever you have to do so when we interrogate them, they'll spill the beans. And in 3 months, no senior officer ever went down to the dungeon at night. In the day shift, if they didn't tell them that, and there was always surveillance. So that's the reason. It was not that they put the bad guards on the night shift and the good guards on the day shift. That's what we call a situational variable. And so now in Abu Ghraib, for example, they don't do that. They have procedures. They have oversight. They have situational procedures that will prevent such abuses. And so the Lucifer Effect book summarizes that. And then in the last chapter, I say, how do you resist? I mean, these are powerful forces. And the point is that in almost all situations, it's the majority who conform, comply, obey. But curiously, there's always a small percent who resist, 10% or more. And then I focus on, maybe we can think of them as heroes. But what does it mean to be a hero? The curious thing is there's almost no research on heroism. It's not in any psychology text. It's not in the positive psychology movement. And it's really so now I want to. They're starting to do research on terrorism, trying to get funding to sponsor students everywhere to do research on terrorism. But in addition, what I've done is created a project in San Francisco that we hope we can scale up nationally, internationally, called the Heroic Imagination Project, or HIP. Our website is www.heroicimagination.org. And essentially, it's to teach young people how to be wise and effective heroes. And the way we're going to teach them is first to teach them the basic street smarts that I learned in the Bronx, South Bronx, of, what are the forces of evil, and how do you identify them? How do you learn to resist? How do you learn to oppose? And then how do we inspire you to the bright side, to teach you how to be a wise and effective hero, how to focus on the other, how to make other people feel special, how to be a positive deviant. Heroes are always deviant because you look around, other people are doing nothing. And so how do you practice so that when the opportunity arises, you're not going to give in to the group and do nothing. You're going to do the right thing when people are doing nothing. The other thing I should mention is that there are two kinds of evil. There's the evil of action, where you do a bad thing. And the broader evil that we all are part of is the evil of inaction. So a bully practices evil of action. But all the rest of us who have known about bullies in junior high and high school and now in business world who've done nothing, we are guilty of the evil of inaction. By our inaction, we allow that evil to be continued.
Now, I'm on your website, heroicimagination.org. You've got just a wealth of resources here. There's a video library, stories of heroism. You've got information about the bystander effect, conformity, obedience to unjust authority, which I think comes right into this 911 call. It's all there, and I would encourage people to check out heroicimagination.org. Is there a book that goes with this?
No, I'm collecting. I'm a research-oriented psychologist, as you know. In fact, I now have 400 publications, not just 300 that you mentioned earlier. I work a lot. So there will be a book, but I need more substance. I need more research rather than platitudes. But I hope our readers will go on, your listeners will go online and look. We desperately need donations. We desperately need sponsors in order to move our program out of San Francisco into the rest of the country, because the message is really for all youth development. It's for 4-H, it's for Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, summer camps, because everything we do is based on fundamental social science research, and we evaluate, before we put a program out, we say, does it work? We have pre-post measures. Do we change information? Do we change attitudes? Do we change values? Not only of the kids, but the teachers and their parents. So it's really a unique program that I'm desperate to, give away to the world.
Well, and I want to jump in and encourage people that if you're not tithing 10% of your income for liberty, you've got to bear in mind that you're tithing between 20 and 60% of your income for tyranny in the form of your taxes. So every dollar that comes into my hands, even if it's someone purchasing a product that I'm selling, or if I'm in an event signing a book, I take 10% before I even deduct the expense of the item, and I set it aside. And my husband and I have a tithing account. We have an envelope that we keep with cash in it. We also just started a bank account where literally 10% of every single penny that comes into our hands goes into there, and it is available for causes like yours. So expect to be receiving a donation from us, Dr. Zimbardo. We will. Yeah, I really want to support what you're doing because, so much of our money is going, I know because I've been in the halls of power and seen the lobbyists there. The corporations certainly get that. They lobby for their interests and they further their cause with money, and they set aside a certain percentage of all their income to make sure that their interests are represented in Congress and in state capitals. And we need to be doing the same across the board, really fighting for liberty and goodness. And I think that this is just a brilliant place to do that. So to all the listeners, I would just put out a challenge to you to begin to set aside 10% of your income. You can dedicate it to a church, to missions. You can dedicate it to liberty actions, secular efforts, whatever it is that's bringing goodness into the world. We've got to fund it. Otherwise, it doesn't stand a chance against the forces of evil, which have a lot of money, ill-gotten gains they spend in that way. All right, let me go to the phone lines and take your questions and calls for my guest, Dr. Philip Zimbardo. Let us go ahead to Emily, who is calling in from Tennessee. Hello, Emily. You're on with Philip Zimbardo. Go ahead.
Hello. I'm calling in on my mother's. She's a Prisonplanet TV member, and we have been raised according to the Word of God. And Jeremiah 2 says, the heart above all things is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who can know it? So until a person is born again, they really have no understanding about good or evil. And we are really like sheep to the slaughter, as Alex says, sheeple, to be, thrown in front of the TV set, which is, The Walking Dead and basically pornography on even basic cable TV channels. And people have, they seem to have nothing else to do. They don't want to read. They don't seem to want to know.
Well, I'm totally with you, Emily, because at the beginning of this hour, when I said I hope I would never get into that situation, I truly hope that my faith and my efforts as a Christian to refine my heart and to really try to be humble and kind and purge those sorts of things in my Christian walk would go a long way towards that. Let me ask our guest here, Dr. Zimbardo, does faith and religion play a role in helping people to resist these kinds of societal forces?
It really should. I mean, essentially, virtually all religions are repositories of morality. Morality is all about teaching people right from wrong, and teaching people to do the good thing and to avoid the bad thing, to resist temptation. The problem is, more and more, religion has less of an impact on our secular life. That people go to church, and while they're in church, they say prayers, they get communion, whatever, and then they go back and are in a different world zone. So the big question is, how do you carry that goodness in your heart, that kindness, that compassion, every day toward everyone? So if you're religious, if you're Catholic, if you're Christian, you carry the message of Jesus that, the least among you is my child, my son, my daughter. And so that's what we're really trying to promote, not in a religious way with the whole organization project, is every day make someone feel special. Every day this week, start out by giving someone a compliment. Make eye contact, shake their hand, know their name, give a compliment. I tell kids, when was the last time you complimented a teacher? Almost never. Well, a good teacher, when was the last time you complimented your mother on a good dinner, on the bus driver? So compliments are a very simple tactic, which we call as part of being a hero in training.
And that's gratitude. Yeah, softening our hearts towards others, reaching out in gratitude with compliments, I think is a beautiful way to start. All right, Emily, thank you for your call. We'll get to more of your calls when we come back on the other end of this break.
If you're listening, you'd know your basic freedoms.
Hey, Katherine Albrecht here, back with you. Final segment of this hour with our guest, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, as I'm filling in for Alex Jones today. And I'll also be back with you Friday. I'll be with you through the next hour as well. It's such a pleasure to be here. Want to remind you really quickly before we get to these phone calls to please support the sponsors of this program. That would be Pro Pure Water Filtration, also eFoods Direct, and Youngevity. Also, if you haven't read the InfoWars magazine, it rocks, and StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine, has an ad right there on the inside front cover. I have a little bit to do with that, so check it out. InfoWars magazine. It's good stuff. All right, let's see if we can get to as many of these callers. We've got a full bank of phone calls. See if we can get as many on as we can. And please do me a favor and let's be brief with the questions. Let's go to George in Connecticut. George, quickly, your question for Dr. Philip Zimbardo. Go right ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to give an example how to break the mindset. My mother was in Germany from 1938 to 1950 as an American. As a result of that, she got involved with the Germans that were too afraid to break the mindset of the conditioning that the Nazis created, but she got them to basically help smuggle Jews out of Germany. And then after the war, she knew Eisenhower because she was part of the military occupation government, and he was trying to starve children or starved the whole country because he hated Germans so badly. And she broke the mindset of many military people and got the help of Patton to basically help feed orphanages and stuff like that. And military people are so conditioned to follow orders, even if they're just against every instinct of human being. So she did it in both cases. So it's possible to break this mindset.
It sounds like your mother's one of the heroes, Dr. Zimbardo.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, please send me that information. My email is drzimbardo@gmail.com, because that's exactly the kind of person who's a silent hero. What she did is extraordinary on both sides. And again, it's following up with the earlier sad thing about somebody gives an order to workers in a home for the aged not to give CPR and so allow somebody to die. You're right. After the war, there was a lot of hostility against Germans, and we were, some of our leaders were willing to let them starve to death. They were not necessarily Nazis. They were people who followed orders of Nazis. So
well, and we hear their stories, but we don't always hear the stories of the heroes. So, George, thank you for your call. I hope you can get in touch with Dr. Zimbardo, and we can take that story to the next level. Let's get a call in from, Zoe in Illinois. Zoe, just quickly, I think we've got about a minute left. Go ahead.
I love that last call, by the way. If my question's been asked, just ignore it. But I have to ask Mr. Zimbardo, I read about this Stanford prisoner experiment back when I was in college, and it always bothered me that somebody would do an experiment like this. How can you know you didn't damage the people that were involved in the experiment permanently, or it really bothered me to think that someone would do this. It was interesting, I admit, but But
yeah, the psychological damage. Thank you, Zoe, of people going through that. Yeah.
So it's very important to realize, and in my book I have a great extended section on it. After the study, immediately afterward, we spent a whole day what's called debriefing. I met with all the guards, all the prisoners and guards together. We followed them up 2 weeks later, a month later, and for some of them...
I'm going to jump in. I know that you feature this information on your website, and unfortunately, man, that break, when it comes fast. So let me just thank you so much, Dr. Zimbardo, for being with me on the show. We will post links to all of your information on the InfoWars website. All right, heroicimagination.org. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. I'm Katherine Albrecht. And hello, Katherine Albrecht here, filling in for Alex Jones as he takes a much-needed vacation, hopefully gets a little rest. I am here with you riding shotgun all 3 hours today. I will also be back with you again on Friday as we together take a gander at the not only the news that's going out there, but maybe a little commentary, a little bit of detangling and trying to understand how we got into this mess that we're in. And of course, as a Bible-believing Christian, I like to say that this mess that we got into started way back when. You know, it really seems like we are on board the Titanic. This is an analogy I gave last week when I was a guest on Alex's show. And if you didn't catch it, I was there in the studio on video, so you can actually see me. I said today, no, not going to do that on video Skype. Thank you. I'll leave that to Alex. But I was in the studio, so I did that live video interview last week. I'm sure you can find it at InfoWars on YouTube and elsewhere. But one of the things that you know, people often ask, how did we get into this mess? You know, it seems so much better in the 50s, or it was so much better in the 20s, or the 1800s. Man, that's when it was perfect. And of course, the Bible itself tells us, King Solomon, one of the wisest guys ever, says, you know, don't go longing for the old days and thinking they were better than today, because they weren't. That's an error. Isn't that interesting that even back in his day, how many thousands of years ago, he was cautioning people, oh yeah, you thought you thought 1200 BC was better than 1150 BC? No, it wasn't. Because the battle that we're fighting is not, you know, it feels like it's a battle against technology and surveillance drones and encroaching corporate takeovers of the entire globe. But the reality is that the battle we're fighting is a spiritual battle, and it is one that has raged in the hearts of men and around the hearts of men from the very beginning of time. You can take it all the way back, if you want to use my analogy of the Titanic, that we struck an iceberg way back when in the Garden of Eden. You know, when Eve took a bite out of that apple, whether you want to view that literally or metaphorically, there was a deal that was struck, and the deal said, hey, we don't want what you've got, God. We want our own power. We want power. The knowledge of good and evil, the power to be as gods. And here we are kind of coming full circle on that, aren't we? Because now we've got the founders of Google saying that they want to turn Google into the mind of God. That's actually a literal answer they gave. What do you want Google to become, guys, in the future? The mind of God. Like, it, really? Hello? Did you really say that? Yeah. So they want to be the mind of God. They want to be inside of your head, the same way that God is omniscient and omnipotent, sees all things, knows all things, numbers the hairs on your head, knows when every time a sparrow falls from the sky. God knows it all. And the folks over there at Google, they want to know it too. They want a picture of the front of your house. They want a picture of your backyard. They want, you know, and it's not just Google. It just happens that Google happens to be the company right now that is holding all the toys. But you better believe the NSA and Interpol and the global banking elite and the pond scum, that's what I call them, the scum that has risen to the top of the pond, choking out the oxygen from the rest of us, they all want those same powers too. These are not new powers that are being sought. It's just we now have new technology to enable them to get the powers that they want to have over the rest of us. And anytime, you know, the best definition I've ever come up with for government is people who have sought power over others and obtained it. And those are the very people that shouldn't have power, if you think about it. The people who we have given the power to and our money to, between 20 and 60% of our income goes into their hands. Those are people who crave power. They thrive on it. It's like Miracle Grow to the weeds in your backyard when you give them money and you give them power. And that is why, you know, this is, and again, it's not a new battle. It's maybe a little bit new because we're the first generation or nation that's figured out how to try to thwart it, and we're trying to hold on to that constitutional system of checks and balances. But the battle's been raging forever. And it's going to continue to rage. All right. I'm your host, Dr. Katherine Albrecht, filling in for Alex Jones. And we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Oh, man, that's taking me back. Jerry Rafferty. Oh, my gosh. My brain is jammed full of irrelevant details. Isn't it? Can you imagine what we could do? Like what brain power we would have if we took stuff like the fact that that song is called Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty and replaced it with, I don't know, maybe the literal text of the Constitution. Why weren't they teaching me that when I was in my teens? All right. Hey, listen, I am, in case you don't know who this is Dr. Katherine Albrecht filling in for Alex Jones. And we're going into hour 3 of absolutely the Liberty Marathon here that is the daily Alex Jones radio program. Such a delight to be able to sit in the director's chair of this show, even just briefly. Got to tell you, Alex has done just such a tremendous job in recent years, waking people up, just letting people know what's going on, kind of breaking through the mainstream media and all of its little house of glass there, and all the lies that we're being told. So I my hat is off to Alex Jones. I hope that his hat is off and that he's getting a nice warm massage, maybe drinking Mai Tais on a beach somewhere. He's probably off in some undisclosed location, but let's hope he's getting a good rest. All right, well, I'm with you for the remainder of this hour. Also going to be with you on Friday when we're going to do some good news on my radio show, KMAshow.com. Every Friday we dedicate to de-stressing and decompressing from all the bad news that we cover Monday through Thursday and Saturdays as well. And Friday is Good News Friday. We're going to try to bring some good news onto this radio program as well. I welcome your comments and thoughts in the good news arena. You can always drop me a line. My email address is kma@spychips.com, kma@spychips.com, my website, KMA Radio. And if you've got some good news, maybe maybe a piece of legislation that's going in the right direction, or maybe one that was going the wrong direction and got killed. Maybe you're an activist out there. Maybe you're a musician making some good music. Hey, we got some great music right around the Alex Jones Command Center right there in Austin. Love to hear from you guys with some good news. And Friday, we're going to loosen up those neckties, take off those uncomfortable high heels. You ladies, peel out of those pantyhose and put on something comfy. And we'll look at the positivity when Friday rolls around. All right, well, today I've got a guest for you. And Jon Rappoport is with me this hour. He is the guy who takes a look at the news and gives it his own little twist. In fact, he sent an absolutely awesome email out yesterday. Remember we had Lenore Skenazy on the show yesterday talking about that kid who ate the strawberry Pop-Tart into the shape of what he thought was a mountain, and his teacher thought it was a gun and suspended the kid for 2 days. I shouldn't laugh. I should be absolutely just lividly crying. But Jon Rappoport had some great responses to that, and it is my joy to bring him on the show right now. Jon, hello, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's great to have you with me. So what did you think about this strawberry Pop-Tart? I loved your response calling for an armed insurrection. Let me let you share that with the listeners.
Yeah, an armed insurrection of all the kids in the school taking all their tarts and all making guns out of them and saying, here we are, this is the strawberry tart rebellion. So suspend us, kick us out, get rid of us, send us home. We'll bring our parents back to school, and our parents can talk to you, to the school board, and say, you're completely and utterly and totally out of your minds. And so therefore, unless you rescind this policy and get some quick sanity, we're going to take all the kids out of the school permanently, not suspended. We're going to just take them out, period. That's it. Our kids are going to be removed from you lunatics. We're going to start our own school, and then you can figure out how to get federal dollars for every student that you don't have now in the school, because you've obviously gone completely insane. I mean, that's what it takes. See, it's not just, okay, well, they made a mistake, they're incompetent, somebody's stupid. No, on a local level, people have to stand up to these fascists. They have to go there and they say, okay, this is a tart. This is a gun. That's right, it's a gun. I have a permit to carry it. This is a tart and this is a gun. You people are insane. And we're going to draw the line in the sand here. We're not going to permit you to do this to our children anymore. And then in schools across the country, you'll see more of that happening as people go to their school boards and they say, oh, yeah, my kid brought a paper gun. No, it was a bubble gun. Remember that? And then there was the water pistol. Then there was the picture of the gun. And so we're going to take all of our kids out of school because you people are crazy.
Yeah, no, the Hello Kitty bubble gun, not bubble gum, but the bubble gun that, you pull the trigger on the little pink plastic Hello Kitty and little bubbles fly out. And a kid got suspended for that as well. So, when they're suspending kids for throwing fake grenades, just pretending to pull the pin out of a grenade and pretending to throw it to blow up the bad guys in a box because it's something the kids saw on a cartoon. Sometimes I wonder, and my degree, actually, my background is in human development and psychology and education. So I spent a lot of years at Harvard studying how kids develop and how their minds develop and how their educational exposure shapes and molds them into what they become as adults. And I got to tell you, even with all that training, I have no preparation for even beginning to comprehend what happens to children who are exposed to this kind of nonsense from adults. Because if you're a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid and you see that your classmate is being expelled, suspended for 2 days for eating a Pop-Tart into the wrong shape, what does that teach you about the world? What does that teach you about the adults around you? Do you just feel like the lunatics are running?
But see, to me, this is really not just a few isolated crazy teachers. What's really happening here is they've had this whole plan on the drawing boards for a long time. We take the guns, we pass laws, executive orders, et cetera, et cetera. We got the media on our side. But more than that, what they're trying to do is change the culture, the whole culture. And you can look at other movements. Look at what happened back in the years when it was okay to wear fur. And then all of a sudden, not only was it not okay to wear fur, but you were in danger if you were wearing fur when you walked down the street. And the entire culture shifted. Now, I'm not saying that was a bad thing at all. I'm just showing you how these things develop. That's what they're trying to do with guns. They want to change the whole culture so that if you just mention the word gun, if you say the word gun, if you write the word gun, if you think the word gun, then all of a sudden you are the outsider. Not just the outsider. You're the bad guy. You're the criminal. You're the potential terrorist. You're the prehistoric Neanderthal who's still living, with guns and bitterly clinging to religion. And out in the rural area, somewhere in the hick land where the uneducated are, you see, that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to change the entire culture so that in the next 5 to 10 years, people will just, I don't know whether I should mention the word gun. Oh, that might be bad. Oh, that might be a terrible thing. That's where all this is going. And that's what they're trying to do.
I think you make a really interesting parallel here with fur, because it was the case. In fact, my own grandfather was a mink rancher long before I was born, but that was how he how he made a living. And back in that era, in the 40s, you can go back and read and see this on the old movies. Having a mink was the ultimate expression of wealth, and so everybody wanted a mink, and it was an integrated part of American culture, for good or bad. I'm not going to make a judgment on that really either way, but the way in which the culture so radically and dramatically changed, to the point where I was in Manhattan just a couple of weeks ago, and it's the dead of winter. It's freezing cold in Manhattan, and I saw a woman in a full-length mink coat. And rather than say, wow, that's really a beautiful mink coat, or rather than, have some other thought, wow, she must be rich, the first thought that went through my head is somebody's going to throw paint on that woman. So the culture has been so thoroughly acculturated to look at fur and have all of these negative images come up. I think the other example we could look at, John, would be smoking. That it used to be, you look at the 1950s and every movie, Cary Grant smoking a cigarette, Doris Day smoking a cigarette, everybody's smoking. And then now we've gotten to the point where even the mention of cigarettes, they can't advertise them, they can't put them in the movies, everybody is anti-smoking. So do you think that kind of a change, that kind of a cultural shift to where everybody just makes the sign of the cross and says, get away from me with that cigarette or that fur, is that going to happen with guns? And do you think it's intentional?
That's what they're trying to do. This is not going to be a slam dunk by any stretch of the imagination, but this is the program. This is the cultural programming. Look at GMO food, for example. When this was introduced by Monsanto at first, it was brought on with the idea, well, the FDA says it's okay. That's what Monsanto said. And then the FDA said, Well, ultimately, it's up to the food producer to guarantee the safety of the food. So the media didn't jump down on this contradiction and say, hey, wait a minute here. This is a scam you're pulling here. You're passing the buck to each other, and all of a sudden, we've got this new kind of genetically engineered food all over America. So Monsanto, along with many of its allies, began to do gigantic amounts of promotion to convince not so much the public, you see, but the educated classes, the technocrats, the scientists. Everybody in the scientific community was going to be convinced by Monsanto. We have the technology. This is all about science. The unwashed masses don't know anything about this. They're crazy. Forget about them. So here's what we have to do. You understand, you people have to be opinion leaders and mold the opinion of the country. You scientists, you tech heads, you people that understand what science is all about, that this food that we're engineering is absolutely equal in nutrition and every other way to the regular food that people have been eating. That's your job, because you see, if you fail, what's going to happen? All of a sudden, science will be defeated, and we'll be back in the Stone Age with superstition and witches and everything. And Monsanto succeeded in that. They succeeded in changing the culture of the technological and scientific classes in America so that these morons and idiots actually go along with the program that GMO food is safe. And they have the ear of the media, as does the government, who's in collusion with Monsanto here. So they changed the culture, and it was only by grassroots.
You prepare by purchasing gold.
Ooh, I didn't. Yeah, how about your right not to drink sewage or eat sewage, as the case may be? Yeah, my guest this hour, Jon Rappoport. His website is nomorefakenews.com, and I am, of course, your guest host today, Dr. Katherine Albrecht, filling in for Alex Jones as he takes a much-needed vacation. Let's all join together and send a prayer of calm and relaxation to overflow Alex right now, wherever he is. Hope he's enjoying, kicking back with a Mai Tai in his hand and nice sun shining on him somewhere as he takes a break. He will be back with you first thing, I believe Monday morning. He might be back over the weekend. I don't know, but I'm going to be here until Friday when we're going to do some good news and lighten the mood just a little bit on Friday. Today, though, we're talking about the ways in which all of this propaganda swirls around us and changes the way we think about things. And not only can they change the way we think about things that are maybe good for us, like potentially the ability, to have self-defense. How about that one? Second Amendment, built right into the Constitution. They change it with propaganda and make it seem like it's a bad thing to care about the Constitution or a bad thing to care about your privacy. They also do the same thing on the other side, where they take something that's utterly revolting, like genetically modified foods, as our guest was talking about, and change it around and make it into a good thing. Or the idea of taking your kids and putting them into a government institution where they're practically in a straitjacket for 14,000 hours of seat time between kindergarten and 12th grade. 14,000 hours, between 12 and 14,000 hours, our kids get indoctrinated in these government institutions. But that's a good thing. That's all about democracy. Well, Jon Rappoport, I want to ask you, when you were talking about this, how they get the elite on board, what I couldn't help but think about is the toilet to tap program. Now, this is a program in Southern California and elsewhere where they're trying to convince the public that it's okay to drink reclaimed sewage water. Toilet to tap is the phrase that they want to eradicate, and instead they want to call it water reclamation. Is that part of the same propaganda message here, and are they going to succeed with this kind of thing?
It is part of the same propaganda message. I mean, I would counter that by just showing a couple dogs lapping water out of a toilet and say, is this what you are? Is this where you're going to drink from? But this is the same idea. There isn't enough to go around. Oh, no, there's not enough to go around, and so everybody has to conserve. I mean, Jimmy Carter tried that all those years ago, and it was a total failure. Because the truth is that there are saltwater conversion plants all over the world, hundreds of them that convert salt water to fresh water. And the only question has been about the cost of doing it. Well, when an administration can waste trillions of dollars, untold trillions, on illegal, illegitimate wars and buying billions of rounds of ammunition and so on and so forth, we could all run it down for the next 12 days on how all this money is being stolen and spent and taken for people and so on, you would think that a federal government that cared at all would say, gee, I have an idea. Let's put up 15 to 20 great saltwater conversion plants around the United States on the coast. And we'll produce fresh water because the technology is there. It's been there for a long time. Yeah, it's going to cost a little bit extra. Maybe the government will have to kick in a few subsidy bucks to make this happen with private companies. We could have all the fresh water we want. But no. That's not part of the propaganda campaign, you see, because the propaganda campaign is aimed at convincing people that it's all scarce. We don't have enough.
And that's
we're running
really
out. It's terrible, and you've got to let us take charge.
I think this fear-mongering is such a potent way to get people to give up their liberties. If you say, listen, we're all going to die, then people say, okay, well, do anything you can. I'll do whatever you say. Just make that not happen. And that's how you get Agenda 21. That's how you get the takeovers, these public-private partnerships. That's how you end up with all of this. I just have to read this, John, because this was blowing my mind here. In Arizona, a case is currently ongoing in the federal court over the use of this toilet to tap reclaimed water to make snow at a ski resort. So this is in Flagstaff. The U.S. Forest Service has actually put up a sign telling people not to eat the snow, even though it's safe for skiing. It's not safe for eating. So just had to throw that out there. There's a lawsuit against it. My hat is off to whoever filed that.
Because if you fall on your face in the snow, you're going to be eating the toilet.
You know? What a
I had an accident
thought
today, and I fell on my face while I was skiing, and then all of a sudden I got this infection.
Yeah.
I don't know what the connection is here, but yeah, exactly.
Diphtheria. To avoid the snow in Flagstaff, all you folks out there in Arizona. All right, I'm your host, Dr. Katherine Albrecht, your guest host, that is, filling in for Alex Jones. My guest, Jon Rappoport, and I will be right back right after this. Stay tuned. Hey, we're back. Katherine Albrecht here. My guest this hour, Jon Rappoport, nomorefakenews.com. Also want to point you over to my website at kmashow.com. My own live radio program comes on about an hour after this one ends, so I'm doing the radio marathon. Here I am. Run. No place I'd rather be, got to tell you, than filling in for Alex Jones yesterday, today, and Friday, as he gets a little break out there. Listen, speaking of InfoWars and giving Alex a break, I am going to step into his shoes and say a good word for all of the fabulous sponsors that keep this program on the air. I want to thank all you listeners for your support of the radio program. I also want to thank eFoods Direct, Pro Pure Water Filters, and the good folks over at Youngevity. And, of course, if you haven't read it yet, I want to encourage you to get a copy or multiple copies and distribute them of the new InfoWars magazine. Now, I'm personally familiar with InfoWars because as one of the creators of StartPage.com, the world's most private search engine, we were one of the flagship early advertisers in the InfoWars magazine. You know, it started out, it was just going to be a couple thousand copies, and then it just exploded. And I got to tell you, it is beautifully produced. I've been involved in a lot of media projects, and I got to tell you, the folks at InfoWars really know how to put something out. It's beautiful. It is informative. It's eye-opening. And it's the kind of thing you can just maybe buy a bunch of copies and leave them sitting at, bus stops and train stations, leave one in the museum, leave them hanging out. All right. I got a clip here. If you're missing Alex's voice, I am too. Let's go ahead and listen to him talk about the InfoWars magazine.
InfoWars magazine is more than just our answer to the internet kill switch. We're also going back to the roots of this country, when our founders, for a decade before 1776, known as the pamphleteers, with hundreds of little printing presses in every colony, got out the real news, the real information, and countered the system. This is tailored, designed with the truth to wake up your friends and family. This is the 21st century version of the pamphleteers. So get them at InfoWarsShop.com or InfoWarsStore.com. Sign up and buy them in bulk. Sign up and be a micro distributor for a full year to buy them in bulk and get one of the newsstands added, or sign up and get 12 issues delivered to your door or give a gift subscription. Whatever you do, be part of the fight. And I want to salute and thank all of you that are subscribers and are getting the magazine in bulk, or who have ever come to InfoWarsStore.com and bought any of our products, because we are supported by patriots and liberty lovers like you. We couldn't do it without you.
There you have it. Hey, good to hear his voice, isn't it? All right. He will be back, by the way, next week. So you'll get all the Alex you can handle. And, I love it when he goes into overdrive because it means he's really got something good going on. And I had the privilege of being in the Austin InfoWars studios last week and actually going into a little bit of overdrive. It's kind of nice. I've gotten some email, by the way, from listeners to Alex's show and also listeners to my own radio show. People writing in saying, it's kind of nice on occasion, to hear a woman's voice. We've got Melissa doing the evening news, kind of bringing some women into the inner circle of the liberty movement. And, we bring a different, maybe a little different approach. But I got to tell you that behind the soft voice, there's a big stick. My latest battle, just to keep you guys posted and up to date, is against the RFID badges being worn around students' necks in San Antonio, Texas. That's where the school district there has required 4,200 students to wear a remotely readable tracking beacon around their necks. I know Alex has been keeping you guys posted on that. Want to let you know that I am involved in a documentary video project on that. Would love to get some support from InfoWars listeners out there. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can contact me, KMA@spychips.com. You can also check out our website at chipfreeschools.com, where I'm working with Heather Fazio from Tag, Texas. She's been a guest on the show in the past, too. Good work happening down there. I'm going to be flying back out to San Antonio in about a week and probably back there again at the end of the month. So lots of travel in my future. Keep me in your prayers because that's a big battle. If we don't stop it in San Antonio, that nasty program is going to spread across Texas, and then it's going to spread across the U.S. Then you're going to have every kid in the country having the expectation that government authorities have the right to literally monitor and record their location every 25 seconds all day long. We got to stop it. We got to nip it in the bud, and I need your help to do that. All right, Jon Rappoport, before the break, we were talking about toilet to tap and GMO. What are your views on what they're doing to our kids? Because it really feels like the kids are in the crosshairs these days, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's the traditional program is brainwash the kids. Get them involved. Get them to think that government is the great dispenser of everything good and that schools and government are really just one thing, which they're turning out to be, of course. But it's the malleable brains and minds of the kids that they are working on here. But I got to tell you that when a kid sees and reads about and watches video of drones everywhere in the sky and tanks rolling down the streets of the United States, U.S. Army tanks and so on and so forth, these kids are going to get their own ideas. Because the one thing that the government can't do is you can't take the life out of a kid altogether and scratch his ability to rebel. And I've seen that all over the place on the internet, and I've seen it in my life because I used to teach school in private schools. And I watched what would happen to kids who were, just ground under the heel of teachers, counselors, principals, parents, media, the government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was amazing what was going on under the surface. What happens when you actually sit down with one of these kids? They do not fold in all cases. There are a lot of kids that come out of this cauldron when they get to be beyond adolescence. They realize what's going on. They realize this is a big control mechanism that we're dealing with here.
Well, of course they do. And if you're expelling them for chewing their Pop-Tarts into the wrong shape or cutting out the letter L and holding it like a gun, they're also going to grow up and think that they're living in a world of lunatics. So clearly that's going to mess with them. And I've seen it really go two different directions. I'm sure you have as well, where either the kids become completely rebellious and say, forget all of this. I don't want any part of any of it. Or they become completely discouraged and docile and on medication because they don't even have the whatever it takes to get through the day because they've been so beaten down and they feel so extraordinarily discouraged. So, I think this is really where parents and adults, caring adults, grandparents, aunts, uncles, neighbors, brothers, sisters, people who are aware and alive and vibrant take a kid out. Take them out, away from the video games. Take them away from school for a day. Take them someplace to actually have some real life, real world experiences and let them, feel the wind in their hair and the sun on their face, because so many of these kids, they're living in this artificial world of Madison Avenue and television and video games. And having, what was the statistic I read on yesterday's program, less than 30 minutes of meaningful conversation per week for the average adolescent male in this country with their parents, less than 30 minutes a week. And if they're not talking to their parents, they're not talking to any other adults either. And
let me
if
say
you look
what's
at the
coming
schools,
up right on the horizon. In 2 months, we're going to see the issue of a new Bible out of the psychiatric profession. It's called the DSM. I've written about it a lot before. It's the whole list of all the officially certified mental disorders. And kids are going to be a major target of this, because definitions are going to be expanded to allow more kids to be diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar, depression, oppositional defiance disorder. These are all made-up crap definitions that don't correspond to anything in reality at all. They're not based on any science whatsoever. There are no diagnostic tests for any psychiatric disorder, no blood test, no saliva test, no brain scan, no genetic test. I've shown that evidence time and time again. The whole profession is a complete fraud. And what's going to happen with the new issue of this Bible is that they're going to go after these kids in a way that you've never seen before in public schools.
Well, let me jump in.
With
actually,
these disorders
hang
and
on.
drugging the life out of them.
Yeah, let me jump in for just a second, John, because I got a question for you. When you talk about the people putting out this manual, are you talking about the psychiatrists or the psychologists? Because I think there's a difference there.
The American Psychiatric Association is the publisher of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Because
the reason I think it's important to make that distinction, the psychiatrists are medical doctors who prescribe drugs. If you go to see a psychiatrist for whatever emotional problem you're having, you will leave with a prescription in your hand. If you go to see a psychologist, on the other hand, and my own background is in psychology, human development and psychology, our guest in the last hour, Dr. Philip Zimbardo, a psychologist who's used his understanding of human behavior to try to promote heroism and goodness. I don't want to paint all the psychologists with a bad brush, because I know that there are people out there doing good stuff.
That's what I'm talking about here. And the thing about schools is, you see, that through their counselors, the kid is going to get referred to a psychiatrist. That's what's going to happen, because that's where the diagnosis is made, right. And that's what these schools are all tuned up to do by the government. We want more diagnoses, and the more diagnoses of these mental disorders you get coming out of the schools, the more federal money pours into the schools, and the more drugs are dispensed. And these kids are drugged with killer toxic compounds, all the way from the ADH drugs like Ritalin and Adderall to valproate and lithium for bipolar, which can actually kill you. So this is what we're seeing, is the vast increase of the drugging of kids at a younger and younger age by psychiatrists. And the schools, although, yes, they have psychologists on staff or that they're connected with, ultimately the machine pushes these kids into psychiatrist offices where the diagnoses are made and the drugs are given. And if the parents are clueless, this kid is going to be destroyed for the rest of his life.
Well, and it's no surprise, too, because we weren't made for that kind of environment. So you try to jam kids into a sit down, be still, don't move. And childhood, adolescence are the two times when people should most be active. And here we are forcing them to sit in a chair and then label them as somehow ill or maladjusted if they can't do it. I would almost say that the kid who's able to sit in a chair and follow the rules and keep their mouth shut for 8 hours a day, 14,000 hours between kindergarten and high school, that a kid who's able to do that is when we ought to probably go, hello, anybody in there,
help. By the way, Josh Welch, who is the kid with the strawberry tart gun,
yes.
In the story that ran about him, you look at a painting that he did. He's a very talented artist. And he has been diagnosed with ADHD. Undoubtedly, he's on Ritalin, you see, because, he's got other interests than what's going on in the classroom, so he must be sick. So we have to diagnose him. Yeah, the kid is a talented painter. So he's bored, he's sitting there, and he starts fooling around, biting pieces out of a strawberry and all of a sudden teacher says, hey, that looks like a gun. We got to suspend you from school. That teacher is mentally ill.
Yeah, and they're sending a message to the kid, don't ever eat your Pop-Tart in any way other than the other kids eat their Pop-Tarts, or we're going to bop you on the head. All right,
I want to open up out of that tart.
Yeah, I want to open up the phone lines now. 1-800-259-9231. Also, I've been getting your email coming in. KMA@spychips.com is my email. KMAshow.com is my website. And I got an email. I got to share this one with you. This comes in from old white cranky male Philip, and I got a kick out of his email. He says, Alex Jones is not getting a gentle massage, nor is he getting his hair or nails done, nor having a quiet romantic dinner. Please. He is out shooting a Barrett 50 caliber, killing wild boars with just a pocket knife, getting muddied and bloodied, sunburnt, cut up by cactus, wrestling with his son, running the jogs, painting, getting up early with his telescope to look at the heavens, wrangling with his wife, kissing his daughters on the forehead and fussing over them, thanking God and strategizing the next expansion of the fight. And then he gives me a little rib. He says, you're such a girl. And then he put, that's a joke. Yeah. All right. He wants my battle yell. I'll have to work on that. I'll see if I can do that on Good News Friday for you there. Philip, thank you for setting me straight. Yeah, I know Alex isn't out doing that. I just sometimes wish he would, because I want him around for a while. And I got to tell you, sometimes I see that blood pressure start to inch up the scale. And I'm like, Alex, dude. So, but I am a girl, and I do relax in different ways. Maybe shooting that Barrett 50 caliber is just what he needs to get that blood pressure down again. All right, let's go to the phone lines. So we got Mike calling in from Tennessee. Hi, Mike. You're on with, myself, Katherine Albrecht, and also Jon Rappoport. Go right ahead.
Oh, good morning, or good afternoon. In the prisons, anytime a person does anything that is not of the norm, they automatically send them in to see a psychiatrist, and the automatic fallback is drugs. And if you're feeling fine, they'll always tell you, if there's anything we can do, if you would like one of these drugs, just let us know which flavor you like, and they will prescribe them to you.
No question about it. And to follow up on that, soldiers in the battlefield, going back to 1999, if you wanted to enlist in the Army and you had any kind of history of any psychiatric drug use, including Ritalin, you couldn't get in. Now, a mere decade or so later, not only do you get in, but you have to say that you will take psychiatric drugs and not just Ritalin. And they give battlefield soldiers that are going out into the field packs of a couple of weeks at least at a time of these psychiatric drugs, highly dangerous antidepressants like Prozac, Zoloft, and so on. And these soldiers are self-medicating out in the field. Now, these drugs cause violent action on the part of anybody. So imagine what's going on out in the battlefield. This is sheer chaos. It's absolute criminality and insanity brought to you by pharmaceutical companies making a deal with the Army and the Pentagon.
Yeah, and it's not just there. They're making the deals everywhere. There's enormous, literally billions of dollars being made in this. Hey, thanks for the call, Mike. Want to go to Mark calling in from Florida. Hi, Mark. You're on with Jon Rappoport and Katherine Albrecht. Go ahead.
Hey, John. Yeah, my son was on Ritalin in school, and I understand everything you guys are saying. I did want to touch on another subject about the Linda Jordan case, about Obama's eligibility fraud, and also Orly Tates, which hasn't been covered in the media. I just wanted to point that out. Maybe somebody could look into that.
All right. Well, we got the producers standing by listening. I'm sure they're taking good notes on that. So thanks for the tip. And let's see if we can get in one more call before this break coming up. Let's go to Sean calling in from Texas. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Hey, Sean, you're on with Jon Rappoport and Katherine Albrecht. Go right ahead.
Oh, I've been wanting to talk to y'all for so long. I listen to you all the time. Would it be fair to say that patience is a learned behavior? I understand people are born with different dispositions, but generally speaking, most of the things that we go through childhood and early adulthood and so on is we learn how to discipline ourselves. We learn how to react and act in certain situations. And the reason I'm asking this is because I'm almost 100% certain that when I was young, I probably would have been diagnosed with ADHD in school. But I had parents and teachers that worked through my
Tell you what, let me tackle that. Let me tackle that in the other end of this break. That actually ties into my area of expertise, developmental psychology. So we'll cover that when we come back with Jon Rappoport. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey, Katherine Albrecht back with you. We all know Alex Jones is out there. What is he doing? Wrestling cactuses with his bare hands? Yeah. Glad he's doing whatever it is he's up to out there. And I'm glad you're with me this hour. We are kind of shooting the breeze just a little bit with Jon Rappoport. No More Fake News is his website. Just before the break, we got a question coming in from a caller who I think has dropped off to hear the answer on the air. But the question being, is patience a learned skill? And the answer to that is that human beings go through some pretty well-defined phases. Like all of us go through the same phases of development through certain years of early childhood. And you can really mess those up if you're not careful. But yes, patience is indeed one of them, where we learn how to moderate our behavior. You know, if you look at a little kid, they don't get their way and they immediately burst into tears. And you like to think that adults don't get their way and we're a little more strategic about how we respond to things than children. And yes, caller, you were absolutely right that it can be the help of an adult. You know, normally a parent or a caring adult that's a member of your inner circle who can kind of take you by the hand and guide you through those periods of time. That's normally the role of parents. Now we're putting it out to the schools, but teachers don't have time to do that for 35 kids. You know, my mom is a school teacher in the Los Angeles schools. She has over 150 kids in her caseload. I said to her, Mom, how can you even know their names, much less have an opportunity to sit there and help each one of them with their individual issues? And each of those kids has 6 different teachers. Each of those teachers has 150 kids. So unless the parents are really stepping in and doing it, it's no wonder that the schools are saying, yeah, let's stick them on drugs. It's the only thing we can do. We don't have the resources to do anything else. So that's where they're being drugs. You don't see homeschooled kids being prescribed these kinds of medications because homeschooled kids are given the helping hand by the adults to get through those troubles. Yeah. All right, let's see if we can fit in one or two more phone calls. Let's go to, we got Mona listening in Connecticut. Hey, Mona.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me, Dr. Albrecht. I really admire your work. I have younger cousins who are in elementary school in Massachusetts, and it's pretty much a norm for the kids to have all these cell phones and smartphones.
Sure.
And now they're getting more and more linked into the school systems, according to what my aunt has told me. So my question is it really my place to talk to my cousins about this and warn them?
Well, I'm looking at the clock, and we're about to get cut off here. So let me just jump in with an answer. And I would say absolutely. I almost died of breast cancer. And now that I'm coming back, the one thing I've learned is if I've got something to say, I better say it now because I may not get another chance. And the person I need to say it to may never hear it again from anybody else unless I do. It doesn't mean you be a pest and you be a pain and you rag on people, but it means you say what you know and you provide them with the facts, and then you just graciously step back and let them do with it what they will. Hey, thanks for the call, Mona. Sorry to David, Matt, and Helena that I was not able to get to your calls, but we are coming down to the end of the show. Jon Rappoport, I want to thank you so much for being my guest this hour and for all you've done over the years for InfoWars. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
All right. And Jon Rappoport, my guest, nomorefakenews.com. My website, of course, is kmashow.com. I'll be going live on my own radio show here in just a little bit. And also, while Alex Jones is out there wrestling wild boars with his bare hands and with a pocket knife, I want to remind you that he will be back next week. And I believe Mike Adams is going to be riding shotgun with you here tomorrow. I will be back again on Friday. My email address is kma@spychips.com if you want to drop me a line for Good News Friday. Always on the lookout for good news. It's a little hard to come by these days. So if you've got some, send it my way. Do me a favor, put the word radio in the subject bar and Good News Friday, and I will see you then. All right, God bless you, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.